We are all experiencing an unprecedented time in our lives right now. The level of uncertainty, anxiety, and fear can be overpowering as we learn to navigate in our new world, all doing our part, whether it be social distancing, staying home, and abiding by federal guidelines. There are so many on the front lines who are battling a war against an invisible enemy. Being on the front lines can place a person's physical and mental health in jeopardy. A team of professionals has come together and created a program called Resilient Minds on the Front Lines to bring tools, knowledge, skills, and instruction to assist in a time of need. This team is dedicated to helping those who help others. On today's webcast, Dr. Tumelty Felice, education and psychology professor and master resiliency instructor. Dr. Kate teaches us how to practice mindfulness and discusses how mindfulness is a gift you not only give yourself, but also to those around you. Your hosts for today's webcasts are Master Resiliency Instructor Michael Pellegrino and Dr. Gabrielle Salfati, Professor of Psychology and Certified Resilience Trainer.
Our team at Resilient Minds on the Front Lines is dedicated to bringing you 15 minutes of hope in a world turned upside down. The topics in our webcast are all meant to help those on the front lines help themselves and others. In this webcast, Dr. Kate Tumelty Felice talks to us about how resiliency is about hope and bouncing back after adversity. Dr. Kate shows us how to use breathing techniques to allow us to be present in the moment. This is something anyone can do at any time. Thank you for joining us. Be safe, be healthy, be resilient.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kate Tumelty Felice. I'm an education and psychology professor and a master resiliency trainer. As a master resiliency trainer, I know that resiliency is about bouncing back after adversity, and it's about hope. As an educator, I know that the skill set we need to have resiliency is something that can be learned and practiced over time. So as a teacher, I'm going to give you a little assignment right now. Remember when you were in school and your teacher would say, clear your desk and take out something to write with, and all of a sudden heart rate would increase, breathing rate would increase? Don't worry, we're ready for this quiz today. All I need you to do is find your breath. So whether you're a deep belly breather or whether your breaths are a little bit more shallow, find your breath, and we're going to start to count it right now. And I'm going to give you about 15 seconds to count how many breaths you take during that time. So you should be counting right now, and we're just going to count the total number of breaths you take during that 15 seconds. And you can end right now. Since we're in school and I'm already giving you work to do, I'm going to tell you to multiply that by 4. And that's your breathing rate in a minute. And that's not a foreign concept. Many of us know that you need to check someone's breathing rate to check for life, right? And that's a very valuable and precious resource, our ability to breathe, that sometimes we take for granted. Our time is also a valuable and precious resource. So I want to share with you why I'm spending some of your time, and I appreciate your time today because I want to talk to you about mindfulness. Mindfulness ties into our breathing because it's something in this out of control world that allows us the ability to control exactly the moment that we're in. Much of what's going on right now, much of life in general, feels so out of our control that we're always grasping, right? And they say if you live in the future, it's worry. If you live in the past, it's regret. How do you live right in the moment that you're in? Part of that is through controlling our breathing. It is something you can control, which is interesting because it's one thing in the autonomic nervous system that is able to be controlled consciously by us, that we can think about our breathing and practicing that pausing and waiting. I define mindfulness as non-judgmental awareness and presence in the moment that you're in. Presence, something that you can control. Being exactly where you are in that moment. That can be in your breathing and being aware of your breathing and controlling that deep breath in and deep breath out. It can be mindfulness in what you're eating, and instead of in the quick time you have scarfing down that food, actually tasting the food. It can be in an exchange with another person, being very aware and present of what you're saying and what they're saying, not thinking about the next thing you want to say, but just being aware of what is going on in that moment. Mindfulness is a gift you give not only yourself, much like resiliency, it's a gift that you give the people around you because you're there. But how do we do that in such an out of control world? How do we control something that is spinning around us and be present in moments that we can't anticipate. And how do we do that in the body that we're in? That automatically goes to that place of reaction, right? Because if we're saying that mindfulness is pausing before we react, and our body's go-to is react because I have to, how do we hijack that? The way we do that is through the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is one of the biggest nerves that run through your body. It goes from our brain and goes to every major part of us and controls every major part of us, our heart, our lungs, all the way down to our gut. And its go-to initially when we react to something is to the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the one that is fight, flight, or freeze. So when something happens, when we perceive a threat, when there's a monster chasing us, that's the nervous system, the one that puts us into reaction mode. The opposite of what I'm talking about in being mindful, right? It goes there without us having to even think about it. Sometimes like breathing, right? So we go and our heart rate increases when that monster's chasing us, our breathing rate increases, our pupils dilate. Pretty good if there's a threat, but not necessarily optimal for everyday function and decision making. Because when our brain pushes us right to that reactionary model of being with the ready to go, cortisol's dumping in, we bypass any kind of, and we never get to really, the prefrontal cortex, the logic, the decision making, the rational mind, because we're right in the survival mode. We're in that amygdala, we're emotional, we're reacting, and we're not pausing. And sometimes we don't have the luxury of pausing. We don't have the luxury of being in the moment because we have to handle the threat that's coming at us. We have to deal with it when we're being chased by the monster. But what happens when the monster's in our head? What do we do when the monster is up here and it's our concerns and it's our worries and it's our fear and it's our trying to control things that are not within our control? That's when we can hijack that vagus nerve. We can bypass or work with our sympathetic nervous system to tap into our parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system, sometimes we hear as our rest and digest. It's the relaxation. It's the one that lets us pause and react with much more logic and reason so that we can think it out. In the moment, that's hard to do. Something as simple as mindful breathing, mindfulness, that one pause before we react. Hard to do, but we have the ability to train ourselves to do it. The first time I testified in court, an assistant prosecutor told me, before you answer any question, I don't care what it is, even if it's your name, I want you to take a deep breath. And it sounded kind of odd because I felt like when someone asked me a question, I have to hurry up and give an answer. But I took his advice because he knew a lot more than I did. And when he was prepping me for questions, I soon realized why he did that. And I'm sure you realize it as well. If I paused before I answered simple questions like my name, I had time rather than to give my first initial response filled with all that stress and emotionality and back up and give a logical answer. When the questions got harder, and the answers really mattered, and my action could be life or death, and we're all involved in situations where we need to make an immediate decision and respond in a way that could affect life or death, that tiny little pause gave me a moment to rewire that system to be able to at least tap into the relaxation mode, the prefrontal cortex, the decision making, so that I could answer in a coherent and logical way. Practicing the pause made all the difference. We can do that in our daily life. A lot of people do that in their training. The military does this in their training. I'm going to give you one simple technique that allows you to tap into that. It's called box breathing. Box breathing is a pretty simple concept and usually counted by fours. So you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Something that simple resets your immediacy into the sympathetic nervous system and allows you to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system. About 40 million people in our country have anxiety. And one of the things that we recommend with anxiety is to control what you can and to tap into the things that are right around you. Stopping and finding 5 things that I can see, 4 things that I can touch, 3 things that I can hear, 2 things that I can smell, 1 thing that I can taste. Through all that, I'm breathing, right? And it allows me to pause and be more logical and reasonable in situations that don't always facilitate that. So you have to facilitate that yourself. One trick I'm going to give you, and I'm going to let you take away with you to help build your own resiliency, is to think about very simply a breath in which your exhale is longer than your inhale. I'm going to give you homework. I started this as a teacher, I'll end it as a teacher. Your homework is when you're doing something that is a mindless task, I'm asking you to be mindful in that task. And I'm going to ask you to do that by breathing. Let's say you're scrolling through social media or email or anything that you just kind of want to veg out and not really focus. You don't have to focus, but I am asking you to breathe. And all I'm going to ask you to do is when you're scrolling through those emails or that social media, use that as a time, as a challenge, as your homework to mindfully breathe. Inhale, hold, make sure that exhale is longer. Simply by doing that, you put yourself in practice to practice the pause, to be more mindful, to be more resilient and more effective. This is a tool for resiliency. And as I said, that's learned behavior. The more we practice it, the better we become and the healthier we become. Be safe, be strong, be resilient, be mindful. I'm Dr. Kate Tumelty Felice. Thanks so much for your time.
We can't change what happens to us in times of mental, emotional, and physical challenge and adversity. But we can change how we react to that adversity. Resilience is our ability to approach and handle adversity in a way that allows us to bounce back more quickly. And sometimes this process even allows us to grow stronger. In today's video, we had an insightful talk by Dr. Kate Tumelty Felice on the topic of breathing and mindfulness. If we had to summarize the key theme that ran through today's topic and put it in the context of resilience and how we can use this information to help us approach adversity in practice, we can bring it back to the key concept of physical resilience. It can be a challenge when our bodies take over in a situation of fear, worry, and anxiety, and puts us in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. When our bodies are flooded with sensations of panic and fear or other emotions that make it difficult to think straight. Physical resilience is about the connection between our mind and our body. How the physical reactions that happen in our bodies can affect how we feel and think, and vice versa. Also how our feelings and emotions can affect what happens to our bodies. In today's video, we learned about breathing and how it allows us to mindfully bring our attention back to the moment, the now. The only part of our body that we can actually control is our breathing. And by breathing in a way that calms our nervous system down, it gives us that pause, that moment that centers us. It allows the feeling of gaining some of our control back, our attention and our ability to be in the now. And in that moment, we have the space to feel and think differently, which then impacts our bodies to help it calm down. Eckhart Tolle, who talks about the power of now, puts it beautifully when he says, "Be aware of your breathing. Notice how it takes attention away from your thinking and creates space." Calming our nervous system through focusing on our breathing allows us to pause. It allows us to refocus on that now, this moment. And we can then use this moment to think about the situation more calmly. And being able to do so moves us away from that feeling of being out of control and back into having control. That feeling is the basis of resilience, because resilience is about feeling that we can handle the adversity we're facing. In our webcast series, we're committed to help those on the front lines help themselves and others. And it aims to bring you tools and resources from practitioners and professionals in the field of resiliency. Thank you again to Dr. Kate Tumelty Felice for joining us in today's episode, and thank you for joining us. We hope that today's webcast has brought you hope and inspiration. Be safe, be healthy, be resilient.